Yep. I'll call this Board of Education meeting to order. We're gonna go ahead and do introductions due to the number of people that are in the room today. I will acknowledge that I know that there's students outside. We'll have them introduce themselves when they come into the room. But if all the other patrons can introduce themselves as we go around the room, that'll be great. Tina Ray Scott,
Mary Myers,
Kelsey Hartman,
Jamie Johnson,
Marie Blythe,
Billy Linsky.
Jerry Powell. O'Brien.
Julie Howard,
Steve White.
Marty White, Dana Reddick,
Gary Catlin. Don Alderman. Stu Creighton. Jim Crosby.
Sue Crosby,
Kim Katie,
Travis Schwager. John Cosgrove.
Linda Cosgrove, Kelly Gentry, Micah Dornbos, Jordan Piccolo,
Aaron Doty. Cody Catlin.
Peter Knight,
Taylor Adams.
Becky Catlin.
Chris Grant. Mark Leidig.
okay, and we have Bryce joining us online. So, thank you. The first item of business this evening is our consent agenda. The consent agenda includes approval of agenda, approved minutes of the previous meetings, the financial reports, bills presented for payment in the amount of $169,273.13, donations, gifts, and personnel. Under resignations, we have Sarah Mitchell, Council Grove Elementary School 4th grade teacher, and Kaylee Gesselman, Council Grove Junior Senior High School 8th grade math teacher and assistant junior high track coach, junior high student council sponsor, and retirement of Amy Finch, Council Grove Elementary School physical education teacher, Council Grove High School head volleyball coach, Council Grove Junior High assistant basketball coach, and Council Grove High School assistant softball coach. Is there anything anyone would like to see added or removed from the consent agenda?
I just wanted to make sure everyone had time to see it. It got changed right there before the board meeting.
Hearing none, I would entertain a motion.
Madam President, I move that we approve the consent agenda as presented.
All second,
It's been moved and seconded that we approve the consent agenda as presented. All in favor, please raise your right hand. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. The next item that we have on the agenda is the patron forum. We understand that we have had a request to address the board this evening. Mr. Crosby, I would like the board to note that I have limited Mr. Crosby to 8 minutes in his presentation to the board this evening. Jim, if you'd like to move forward, please.
That's okay.
Wherever you wish.
Madam President, after I get done with my presentation, I'll be providing this binder to you for reference. Good evening. At my desk, I have a quote taped to one of my computer monitors that states, quote, "Never worry about who is offended if you speak the truth. Worry about who will be misled, deceived, and destroyed if you don't," end quote. Tonight, I would like to provide you facts and recommendations about the audit performed by Barney and Associates that are true and factual in nature. You're all too familiar with issues with seldom ever being provided recommendations. I will not do that to this governing body tonight. Good evening, Madam President, board members, Dr. Doty, administrators, staff, and patrons of USD 417. My name is Jim Crosby. I am a USD 417 patron and former softball and basketball coach within USD 417 for the last 10 years, having coached over 400 student athletes. That's the reason that I'm here tonight. I'm a 35-year veteran of the United States Army and the Kansas Army National Guard, retiring with over 30 years of federal active service in 2016. From 2016 to 2018, I was a General Schedule 11 employee and employed as the state budget manager for the Kansas National Guard. For approximately 20 of the last 22 years of service to our nation state, I was responsible for budgets at numerous levels used by the Kansas Army National Guard. These accounts included paying allowances, travel, leases, rentals, and purchase of both goods and services. During that time, I withstood multiple audits for multiple levels, to include 2 Department of the Defense AAA audits, as well as performing audits at all multiple levels with and without the Kansas National Guard audit team. In fairness, I am not a certified public accountant. However, I am very familiar with the government accounting standards, also known as the Yellow Book, that was used to provide your audit. It is 234 pages of some of the most mundane reading you've ever heard or ever seen. However, I also know that there are certain requirements, and I believe that some of those requirements were not met during your audit. I'm also adept at budget processes and the perceptions or misperceptions that come with them in the public eye. For the last 6 weeks, I have watched what has transpired in our school district with interest and, quite honestly, a lot of sadness. However, it wasn't until I watched the audit on February 13th, having watched the auditor make her report known to the board, that I decided to conduct my own research. I began by asking the district office under the Freedom of Information Act for the last 5 district audits, a copy of the board's policies, and lastly, a series of questions from 3 emails pertaining to the audit, board policies, and positions within the district office. Those I presented to your district Freedom of Information Officer, Dr. Aaron Doty. Other items such as the Yellow Book for federal funding audits, vehicle registration requirements for Morris County, and the auditor's credentials from the Board of Accountancy I obtained online or by phone call. So everything you hear tonight will be from an open source. I will not name names, but everything will come from an open source. I've heard the term misuse more than I would really like to during this audit. And so that everybody's aware, when you're talking about budget and you're talking about audit, there are 3 things that you talk about in the term misuse. You use erroneous, improper, or unorthodox. We often don't use unorthodox, but it's there. And we often relate it to criminal activity when it meets the words of funds. However, that's not always the case, and I would submit that being unorthodox to achieve an end goal is forward thinking, especially if it saves money to be utilized for other goods and services. I would like to begin the formal portion of my research by discussing the audit that was conducted on December 20th. I'd first like everything that I mentioned, Mrs. Scott, so that you're aware, board members, I have a reference, where it comes from and the page number that it's located on for your ease of use so that you can look it up. I talk about the ethical principles that guide auditors, and then it also talks about professional behavior, and a piece of that I want to quote. And it's quote, any auditor's work that would cause an objective third party with knowledge of relevant information to conclude that the auditor's work was professionally deficient should be brought forth. That is the reason that I'm here. The first reference that I'm going to talk about is in the Yellow Book on page 111 and 112. And again, this is a federal requirement. The Yellow Book is a federal requirement when you deal with all federal funds. And that is talking about the results of any previous engagements. When planning the audit, auditors should ask management of the audited entity to identify previous audits, attestation engagements, and other studies that directly relate to the objectives of the audit. Auditors should evaluate whether the audited entity has taken corrective action to address findings and recommendations from previous engagements that could have a significant effect on the subject matter. Now, on February 13th, the auditor clearly stated that there were, quote, concerns with last year's audit, end quote. However, those concerns were not listed on your May 9th, 2021 audit. If there were concerns, she is required to put those within your audits so that you as the board, the supervisor of the budget, and your business manager can fix those. That's what an audit is for. When you have 0 deficiencies in an audit, money-wise, if your current balance, your receipts equals your end balance, you have a 0 deficiency monetary audit. After that, audits are designed to improve your process. Nothing more, nothing less. In fact, the last 4 audits for USD 417 have been considered clean audits. Despite a lack of support to evidence to support her comment, the comment was made in a public forum, which I believe shines an undue negative light on the USD 417 Board of Education, the budgetary supervisor, and the business manager. Sorry. Reference page 116, a requirement, audit documentation. Auditor should document supervisory review before the report release date of the evidence that supports the findings and conclusions contained in the audit report. Per the USD 417 policy handbook, the superintendent is listed as the budgetary supervisor. Yet the auditor failed to allow him to review the audit findings and conclusions before the report release date. This inaction did not allow him or the USD 417 business manager an opportunity to provide input into the process improvement, matters of mitigation, or evidence to support his decision-making process. Additionally, this didn't allow the USD 417 Board of Education to provide corrective actions or policy updates prior to the audit being briefed in a public forum. Reference page 117, a requirement, availability of individuals and documentation. Subject to applicable provisions of law and regulations, auditors should make appropriate individuals and audit documentation available upon request and in a timely manner to other auditors and or reviewers. At the February 13th, 2013 board meeting, the auditor stated in open forum that only the notes of the purchase, which were actually a one-time lease payment, took lease to own payment of the 2 vehicles, were handwritten notes provided by the business manager. She also stated that she had made an inquiry to John North Ford to receive the required documents. She stated that the initial documents presented to her were on plain stationery and that she felt. Okay.
Can other patrons request to speak?
Absolutely, and we'll limit those to 2 minutes. And we're gonna go for a total of 15 minutes, so there's 7 minutes left in the comment period.
My name is Cody Catlin, and I would like to give my time to Jim Crosby.
Is that acceptable?
I'm Steve Creighton, I'll yield my time to Steve Crosby also.
That was one of the things the attorney said we could do, but we don't have any policy around that.
Is the board comfortable with yielding? All right, Jim, go ahead.
Thank you.
I'll give you the additional 7 minutes.
Okay, thank you.
Unless someone else wants. any
Yeah,
time.
unless
My
it,
name is Deidre and I'll yield my time to Jim Crosby.
Jim, let me get my,
Okay.
All right.
This was a lot easier at home, not in front of people. Again, she stated the initial documents presented to her were on plain stationery, that it was unusual. She also claimed that the quote was posted on September 2nd, 2021, but the actual quote from John North Ford is actually dated on the 3rd of September. Regardless, under a FOIA request, I obtained the documents of both vehicles that were leased to own the USD 417. Both vehicles were registered in Morris County with all required documents as stated by the Morris County Treasurer's Office on September 20th, 2021. Had the auditor chosen to include the budgetary supervisor and or the board clerk in the audit, those documents were readily at hand and could have been provided to the auditor on December 20th, a full 90 days after the vehicles were registered to USD 417 with all appropriate documentation. Reference page 121 and 122 presenting findings in the audit report. I'm going to skip over the first piece and go to the second piece because I think it's more important. It talks about what can and cannot be found. And specifically it states if results cannot be projected, auditors should include their conclusions appropriately. However, there were 4 instances that according to KSA 72-115 that she stated, she said 2. And she reported those 2, which were the lease to own vehicles were in question. But she also knew of 2 others and she failed to report those. And those 2 others are, she failed to identify one of those purchases, which is for air purifiers, for the sum of $59,146 was obtained from the vendor Staples. This vendor is a part of the purchasing consortium and therefore is exempted from the state law. She failed to mention that. And the second violation was from a district employee from $43,738.42 was a matter of the employee simply not knowing the process. That employee has since been informed, received proper training from the superintendent on the sealed bid process. That's what I alluded to. That's what we should do, is learn from our audits. We should, it's always about teaching and learning. If we expect that of our kids, we should expect that of our employees and everybody else within the district as far as teaching and learning goes. The biggest one for me is that the auditor states that USD 417 is in violation of KSA 72-1151. However, services, which are leases, rentals, and those things are actually exempted under KSA 72-1151 because they are a service. One of my recommendations is I would recommend that you contact your KASB attorney and have them give you a definition as what is services and what are goods. Because if it is a service, then you're exempted and you have no issues with it. You then face a $250,000 minimum threshold instead of the $20,000, and that's under federal funds, not under Kansas funds. Reference page 123, another requirement, obtaining and reporting the views of responsible officials. Auditors should obtain and report the views of responsible officials of the audited entity concerning the findings, conclusions, and recommendations in the audit report. At the February 13th board meeting, the auditor stated that there were board members who had concerns about the transparency of the budget. That was her quote. As the USD 417 Board of Education are the responsible officials for overseeing the budget, anything stated to the auditor by a member of the board was required to be annotated on the May 9, 2021 audit, so that processes and corrective actions could be started and updated. This simply was not done. I got some other information from Dr. Doty. I was going to read that, but in the essence of time, I would say a couple of things. One, and this is, believe me, this is not a disparaging comment. The board as a whole has set your business manager up for failure. The business manager, if they have three things that they do. One is they handle the day-to-day, the reconciliation, and the audit. They should not do two of those at the same time. If you do, you're setting them up for failure. So the recommendation is when audits are conducted that you have more than one person at the audit. That's not fair to your business manager. I guess the biggest other thing is one of the questions that I asked is by I asked, by paying off the lease vehicles early, how much money was saved by USD 417? Dr. Doty's response was that he saved a total of $3,643.92. And by your board policy on page 120, you authorize him to do that. As the individual who can pay the bills before the board meeting and any bills to save money, you actually authorized him to make that expenditure to save you money. I'm not going to get into the adversarial piece because, I mean, I will say this. I asked if anybody took part in a telephonic interview piece of the audit. And I was told, yes, it was less than a 5-minute conversation. And that's the only time that your budget supervisor had any instance with your auditor. And if you think that less than 5 minutes enough to have an adversarial relationship, I'll leave that to you. However, I will say this. The easiest way to destroy someone's character who hands a budget daily is to accuse them of misuse of funds, make unsupported remarks in an open forum, or only provide partial information. This was done repeatedly in an open forum portion of the auditor's report. In order to try to understand why this might be done, I conducted a review of the auditor's credentials online and through her dealings with Morris County. USD 417 requires staunch requirements for all employees. The superintendent, the district staff, administrators, teachers, and support staff are all monitored thoroughly. In January of 2018, Barney and Associates was subcontracted by Aldrich Company to handle the audit of Morris County. On June 12th, just 3 days prior to the audit deadline, Ms. Swartz attended the county commissioners meeting and said, quote, The term could not be met and she opted to withdraw from the preparation of the audit, unquote, thus causing Morris County to miss their deadline. That time, okay, there is another piece, in there. I'll sit down, and it's the most important piece, so. Oh, I'm sorry. I would recommend that you look at the auditor's credentials when you have time. And thank you.
Thank you. The next item on our agenda is a spotlight on education. Mr. Meals. There we go. Hey, let's roll. You guys like to come into the middle? You guys come into the middle? That would be great. Go ahead. It's important that you're here. Please, everyone. Okay.
You're doing great.
On January 19th of 2023, 25 students and 5 staff from the Council Grove Junior Senior High School art programs went on a full-day excursion to Kansas City. The first location we graced with our presence was the Nelson Atkins Museum of Art. Upon arriving at the museum, we split into 5 groups of 6, 5 students and 1 staff per group. At this point, we split up and explored the museum exhibits. Different periods and continents are featured in the museum, from Europe to Africa and ancient to modern.
Upon leaving the art museum, we had lunch on the bus while making our way across Kansas City to the Weinberger Fine Arts Gallery. The Weinberger Arts Gallery featured art exclusively created by living artists. One of the big differences between the gallery and the museum is that all the art on the exhibits were for sale. The director of the gallery explained to us how art galleries serve as a middleman between artists and art collectors. She also put out several pieces of art from the storage room to show us. Some were for future exhibitions and some have been recently purchased.
Our third destination was the UMKC Conservatory of Music, Dance, and Theater. Our visit began with a presentation by the head of admissions. He described in detail the programs of study at the conservatory, as well as all the state-of-the-art performance venues on campus and in the surrounding Kansas City area. After the presentation, several conservatory students took us on a campus tour. At the conclusion of our campus tour, we met back at the conservatory and boarded back onto the bus. From there, we had dinner at a Middle Eastern restaurant, the Aladdin Cafe.
And for the grand finale of our excursion, we attended a performance of Hadestown, the musical at Kansas City Music Hall. It was fantastic. 10 out of 10. Everyone should see it. Hadestown is a retelling of the Greek tragedy of Orpheus and Eurydice.
Now, please enjoy this performance of numbers from that musical.
How to get to Hadestown, you have to take the long way down. Through the underground, undercover at night, laying low, staying out of sight. Ain't no compass, brother, ain't no map, just a telephone wire and a railroad track. Keep on walking and don't look back till you get to the bottom land.
Where I'm coming, where I'm coming with you. Wait for me, I'm coming to.
River Styx is high and wide, cinder bricks and razor wire. walls of iron and concrete, hound dogs howling down the gate. Those dogs will lay down and play dead if you got the bones, if you got the bread. But if all you got is your own two legs, just be glad you got 'em.
Where do you think you're going? Who are you? Why are you alone? Who do you
Think you are.
Who are you?
To think that you can walk a road that no one's ever walked before.
love?
You're on the run. Don't give your name, you don't have one. And don't look no one in the eye. That town will try to suck you dry. They'll suck your brain, they'll suck your breath. They'll pluck the heart right out your chest. They'll truss you up in your Sunday best and stuff your mouth with cotton.
Wait,
I hear the one repeating
wait,
the falling of my feet.
it sounds like drumming. Wait,
I hear the rocks and stones
wait,
echo in my song. I'm coming.
We have a few introductions.
Yeah.
Can we start with you, Jane?
Oh.
Want to start?
I'm Jane Schrader. I'm Izzy Acevedo. I'm True Fraser.
I'm Grace Bolio.
I'm Abigail Shear.
I'm Emily Hinkson.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's good. That's gotta go.
Oh, that was good. Have a good night.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And I think we have papers that one just filed back in.
Yeah.
There we go.
Some might be filing out in a moment here.
All right, the next item on our agenda are reports. Administrators send their monthly reports via email. So I'll just start with the administrators that are in the room. Dana, do you have anything to add at this time? Kelsey? Val's available online. Val, do you have anything?
I don't have anything to add, no.
And we would just like to note that Val is in her building tonight because they've got Dr. Seuss night tonight. So
Yes.
that's why she's there.
So I'll be jumping off in just a few minutes, so.
You have anything? Anything you want to add? No. Jordan, anything that you want to? Okay. Mrs. Gentry?
I don't think so. Did anybody have any feedback on our goals? CR2 goal? So far, so good? Okay.
Dr. Doty?
Just real quick, I did get an email, late this afternoon from Police Chief Wengren about our MOU with our SRO officer. I just want to hand it out, for you to review. We don't have to approve it tonight, but it does, just kind of lay out our agreement with the city, to provide, the SRO officer for our district and, the details within that. So if you take some time to review that, let me know. It needs to be signed by board president, myself, and we'll return it to the city. If there's any questions on it, make sure to let me know as well as you get a chance to read through that. And then I just want to make sure everybody got, I know it's the AED quote from Dana about updating our AEDs. Was there any questions over that? And then lastly, I do have the job descriptions for the staffing requests for counselors that are on the agenda later that we went through today and finalized at the admin meeting. There are also a few on there that I'm not sure if the board has approved or not from over the years, and so I just do a blanket approval. So I'll send those all to you so you can review them. And at the next meeting, if you have any questions between now and then, you can ask, and then we can approve them at the next meeting as well. But I do have the ones for the description for the positions today. If you'd like to see those, we can pull those up, or I can email them to you real quick as well for you to review as we talk about that later on the agenda. And that's all I got.
The packet here, is there a date that you would prefer us to give you feedback by? Is there some?
He didn't say in the deadline to get it back to him by, so I mean, it's as soon as possible, but it doesn't have to be done by tomorrow by any means, but yeah.
The board have anything they'd like to report?
I do. Today, Tina Ray and I had an opportunity to collect some feedback from some stakeholders within the district. And a simple question was posed around what is an executive session? Like, what can that be used for? And they were talking about it in regards to just questions from the public. And so I am going to have Bryce, I found the resource, and I'll have Bryce send that out as just a reminder. I think the whole thing is something we should read. It's the board leadership field guide, but on page 10 and 11, specifically, it addresses what an executive session can be utilized for. And this come up as a question again from just administrators because they're fielding it. And this is something I think that could be helpful as the board, as a reminder to the board. I think it can be sent out to administrators.
Yeah.
But I just didn't know it come up from the portal, so I didn't know how they feel about those resources. But I think it would be helpful to the admin team to have the information as well. So if we wouldn't mind, I think Bryce could send that out easily. And then next time, when we meet, if there's questions from it, we could address that.
You want to read those 2 pages?
I certainly can. It won't
That'd be
take very long.
Go ahead.
Let's see here. Okay. The board is required to have an open session prior to and after any executive session, and no binding action can be taken during an executive session. The action to go into executive session must be by formal motion, which includes, and these are the bullet points. The subjects to be discussed during the executive session, the justification for the executive session, the time and the place at which the open meeting shall resume. Oh, am I reading the right? Yes.
Yep, you're right.
Executive sessions are only allowed for the following subjects: personnel matters of non-elected personnel, consultation with an attorney for the body or agency that would be deemed privileged in the attorney-client relationship, matters relating to employer-employee negotiations, whether or not in consultation with the representative or representatives of the body or agency, confidential data relating to financial affairs or trade secrets of corporations, partnerships, trust, and individual proprietorships, matters relating to actions adversely or favorably affecting a person as a student, patient, or resident of a public institution, except any such person shall have the right to a public hearing if requested by the person. Preliminary discussions related to the acquisition of real property and security, and then it kind of defines security, but it also, I think, for the board and admin to review on the pages after that, it talks about board meetings, special meetings, executive sessions, and hearings, which I know has been a confusion point as well. So just a revisit of the information. I downloaded the piece and I'll send that to Bryce. And if that's possible, I'd prefer it to go to the admin as well. Thank you.
Anything else? We'll move right into our discussion items. First item we have is our strategic planning survey.
To throw it up there, but I don't have screen sharing, right?
Sorry.
You know how to do it on that? I don't know how that section is set up.
I don't know either.
It's different than one I used. Go under more. Nope.
Yeah, there you go.
And it's in your packet too, so you can pull it up on your devices. So these are the questions that KSAB sent for the strategic planning survey that would gain input from all stakeholders before the meeting on April 5th, I believe. So he would like for us to go through these and just to make sure there's not any specific questions or concerns over the questions that are listed. We can put some input into it, but these questions are already designed to the process and the matrices that they use. So he advised us that we can't reinvent the wheel on the survey, but we could put some input into the survey if we wanted to. We did change question 18. You'll notice there's an 18 and 18A because there was a question there about childcare. And we took the childcare piece off and replaced it with preschool, pre-K, instead of the childcare option. So that's why there's an 18 and 18A. So we'll let them reformat that however it looks for on their end for a survey response when it goes out to stakeholders. So were there any questions as you reviewed this or any concerns or suggestions or input they would like to have for the questions?
Who is this community planning committee that it's not comfortable about?
Those are the people that we are sending those emails out to, that list that we asked the board members to compile
Okay.
their information from.
Okay.
They will be known as the Community Planning Committee.
Okay.
Yeah, just for reference on what Tina Ray's talking about there is part of this process in those two in-person meetings, KSAB asked for each board member to invite 5 patrons to the meeting, and then of course, the admin team, teachers, all those other stakeholders are welcome to attend as well. But to keep it a manageable group, but yet large enough to have dialogue and groups, they're keeping it around that 25 to 35 stakeholder groups.
And so if board members haven't sent those names to Mr. Doty,
I think we've got everybody right.
I think so, yeah,
Okay,
I think that's the
good.
day I got anybody's.
perfect.
And I'll send an invitation out on your behalf to those people, and that way I can keep track of who's attending, because we will have a light meal starting at 5:15 and then move right into the meeting at 5:30, so. Any questions on those?
The only other question I had was, and they might be able to provide you some context, is the word critical is put in nearly every question. And I just would be curious how they're defining critical. I'm certain that they've thought of that. And it would just be a question you could pose, to them if we're gonna be talking about this. I think, what they, you know what I mean, what they define as critical could be helpful to us as we move forward to kind of sort through decisions.
We reach out to Dr. Hart on that.
And they might not, but I bet they do.
Okay. The next item on the agenda for discussion is the survey on school board practices.
So this was sent out as a request from legislation. So it was sent out by KSAB in response to collect answers from school districts, and then those answers will be aggregated in a presentation back to the K-12 Budget Committee. So they have requested one response from each district for that reason, instead of individual responses from each school board member. So in our agenda meeting the other day, with the president, vice president, and Bryce and I, we talked about maybe we just go through it and get some input. A lot of it we can fill out with the four of us, because it's a lot of routine things. But if there's anything specific anybody wanted to make sure they have some input on, now would be the time, and then we'll get it filled out and sent in as a one response from our school district.
And just so you understand, KSB then is compiling all of the data, and they'll be turning it then back over to the K through 12 or K-12 Budget Committee as so many districts out of 286 responded this way. So many districts responded this way. It's not going to be able to be broken down or disseminated on an individual piece, but just providing that information to the legislature as requested. Any other questions or comments on that?
It seemed pretty straightforward.
Okay. We'll move into our action items. First thing we have is the COVID-19 operational guidelines.
Daniel, turn over to you if you want to walk us through it, please.
Yep, I had sent out to all board members, so I hope you got it, after discussing with administrators, updating our COVID operation guideline policies. Which I was hoping to do this sooner, but we were kind of waiting for those updates to come through from the state and CDC also. But that has not happened quite yet. So we went ahead and things have been kind of progressively evolving. As you know, the quarantine piece is kind of going away. So on both versions of the possible update, you'll notice that the wording for test to stay purposes during quarantine, I'm having that, I think we should remove that piece. On the back side where it's talking about test to know when you're exposed, whether it be in household or not, those things are more of an encouraged to piece now rather than a have to piece. So it's more or less just changing the wording to encouragement. So we would still give that guidance in this policy, but it wouldn't be required with these changes. It also would remove more or less if a student or staff member is having symptoms, we are not, for lack of better words, chasing every single symptom that comes, is reported to us. We just give them that guidance on what we, believe they should be, testing for or possibly doing based on what symptoms they're having. But we would no longer require them to be out of school for 5 days if they choose not to test. Does that make sense? Just kind of went around with it. So it removes that piece. And it also removes the push notification piece, which we had kind of, as an administrative team, decided earlier on that we were kind of getting some complaints that parents were getting so many notifications from us because we were getting, that was when COVID cases were pretty high. And at that point, we let parents know that we were no longer going to send those out because they were getting them every day. They knew we had COVID. So it removes that notification piece as well. The part that is different in the two versions you received is really, it has to do with the isolation piece. So the first one I sent you, I put through the possibility of changing this to, you know, they're out the 5 days and then they can come back, which is kind of how flu is. And it's maybe what we're anticipating coming down the line. It just hasn't been put out there at this point for sure. So after just more discussion with Morris County Health Department, there was that recommendation still there for that testing piece coming back from a COVID diagnosis. So this isn't just symptoms, this is actual diagnosis. And they still are recommending those 2 negative tests 48 hours apart. So in your first version, that part was actually removed with that 5 days out of school and then coming back. Whereas version 2 kept the testing part in there as it is now. Did I lose anybody on that part?
Yes. So really what we're looking, you didn't, by the way, but I want to make sure I'm understanding. The difference is totally the test or the testing piece.
It's really, it's the testing piece when you've been diagnosed with COVID.
Right.
Yes, that is the only difference between the 2 versions. Everything else is the same. So the one I sent you second is with that recommendation from our health department to continue with that recommendation from the state and CDC level to still do the testing when they return. And that is more or less to be out of the mask early. So a person can still come back after being diagnosed with COVID after 5 days. And if they choose to wear a mask for 5 more days, no more testing has to be done. But if they would like to be out of the mask earlier, our policy still requires, and recommendation from state and CDC still sits at 2 negative tests 48 hours apart after day 5.
So obviously I can speak to this. And the reason that I reached out to Dana and said to do the second one is because in this policy, it says that anything the health department will supersede the above policy. And the way it stands right now from KDHE guidance is for a COVID positive individual, the guidance is, and it is not should, it is cut and dry, still enforceable. So if you are positive, your first 5 days, you have to stay at home and isolate. Your second 5 days, you can go do whatever you want to, you just have to wear a mask for those 5 days. If you can get a test on day 5 that is negative and a test on day 7 that is negative, then you could get out of that mask before those 10 days are over. And so my recommendation was to her day 5 for your first one, and then 48 hours later, day 7. So essentially you could stop wearing a mask on day 8 if you were lucky and save yourself 2 days of mask wearing. So basically I reached out to Dana and just said, hey, you know, the only thing that public health is still pushing is the guidelines for when you are positive. That is still legal and enforceable. So I said, we either need to leave them the same as what the state is recommending, or change the policy to say that we're not going to then have the health department supersede, because we're contradicting ourselves within our policy. So,
and I also want to add that, you know, we're anticipating that possible removal, or what's the word I want to say, the removal of the declaration of emergency by Biden possibly on May 11th. And so I'm foreseeing that we're going to be having COVID guidelines in our Kansas classroom for disease management, which is where all of our guidance comes from anyway on what we do in schools. And my guess is that's where COVID's going to fit into in the very near future, but it's just not there yet. And that may be because that declaration of emergency still exists, but I anticipate it coming.
I would agree with Dana. I truly feel like it's going to turn into how we treat influenza. If you test positive for influenza, you stay home for 5 days. As soon as you are fever free for 24 hours, you're good to go. And that's what I think they'll do with COVID. Unfortunately, they have not made that change yet. And for right now, the state is very quiet on what the end of that public health emergency looks like in May. We are all asking every week if they have anything for us. And so far, I don't think they really know, to be honest. what that means for moving forward, but I agree for what it's worth. I don't think that the isolation piece of it will stay the same as it is right now. I do think that will change.
Dan or Jamie, I had a question about the masks. You had said, or you had mentioned day 5 through whatever until you test negative, the mask, but on here, the should is crossed out and are encouraged is highlighted. So for people at
Which
home,
part?
all the green that's highlighted, or can you guide me into the bullet point for that, please?
So that part is for contacts.
Okay,
So anybody, so the state did away with. I shouldn't say they did away with, they changed their quarantine to where they recommend that if you have been exposed to COVID, you wear a mask for 10 days
right.
after your last exposure. And that is what they recommend, which is why she changed it to encouraged, because it's no longer enforceable. So it's not required, it's recommended. So the only thing that is enforceable at this point is if you are positive for COVID. And so that's why all of the green part is encouraged to, because that's still what the state recommends, but it's no longer a requirement.
So
So,
those are in green because I added those words in.
Okay, I was just clarifying.
Yeah.
they're no longer calling it quarantine.
So are we making a decision between one or the other?
That's my
Is
next
that-
question.
It more or less because the isolation part is different and because the way I sent it out the first time and then we talked more after the feedback from the health department and how the rest of our policy reads. That was when I decided I'd send you the second one and let you make your determination on which one because of the isolation piece being different.
Well, you're the expert here, so help us make
Well,
a
If
recommendation.
we're going to keep in our policy that we're gonna let health department, CDC, supersede our policies, then yes, it needs to stay as is.
That
As
wasn't
the
helpful.
isolation needs to stay as the
Yeah,
definition.
okay,
when they
I see
return.
what she's saying, yes.
Yes.
Thank you, Mrs. Reddick.
So that would be version 2.
Got it, thank you. We've looked at a lot of these versions.
I know. Thankfully, we haven't had to do this a lot this year. It was time, it needed to be, some wording needed to be changed. If you approve.
And the first version did not include the 2 tests 2 days apart. Is that accurate?
Correct.
Any other questions?
Are home tests allowed? I know that'll be a question that came up. Okay.
And we have those and supply them to people as needed.
So before I make the motion, I want to ask if my motion would include the second version, or is the second version basically what we're talking about? You see what I'm saying?
Are these in order? When you say first and second,
Yeah.
are they good? We're on one.
Second one of version 2, because it had the Morris County Health Department gave their input, and I felt like we needed to have that.
And that was updated on the 6th, is that right?
They both were.
They both were.
And
Same.
version 2 has the green, correct?
Well, they
Both
both
are
have
both
the
are
green.
Green.
Oh, geez.
But it has the
Oh,
isolation.
now I
at the
see it.
top.
Yeah.
So it's the
Version
second
2
one,
has-
listed here, version 2. The
Version-
second one in the packet, version 2.
Yes.
Okay.
Version 2 is the second one in the packet, because under the
Yeah.
top of the first page, there's nothing crossed out in that first
But I can't
paragraph.
remember if you guys received it as version 2.
No, it's
I'm
just
not
listed in the
seeing
packet.
that. That's why I wanted to make this be
So,
accurate.
Right, so just for clarification, the first one listed is version 1, and then the second one in your packet listed as version 2.
Sorry about that.
No,
That's
that's
all right.
right. So, Madam President, I move that we approve the proposed changes to the district COVID-19 operational guidelines proposed 2 version. Is that right?
Been moved and seconded that we approve version 2 of the district's COVID-19 operation guidelines as presented this evening. Any other discussion?
It has nothing to do with this, but do we have plenty of testing supplies still?
Yes.
Okay. That was not about the motion, but.
It's okay,
that's
it's
a good
still part of the
question.
discussion.
Yeah.
So,
We have
Okay.
over 3,000 tests.
oh, good, okay. I'm not gonna worry about you then.
Okay, all in favor, please raise your right hand. Thank you. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. The next item on our agenda is the staffing request.
So I didn't receive any feedback from anybody requesting additional information. Are there any more questions about the two proposed staffing requests for the additional counselors? One would be at Council Grove Elementary School, and then the second one would be at the junior, senior high school.
I think if we can support it, it's a fabulous idea. So,
Definitely think it's needed.
And how soon will that start?
Well, if it's approved tonight, then we can start advertising it, and then it would be for the next school year. I wouldn't find anybody that would be able to. It would start the 23-24 school year.
Any other questions?
Madam President, I move that we approve the request of hiring the additional 2 new counselor positions, one for the junior, senior high school and one for the elementary school. Second.
Council Grove Elementary.
Oh, yes, sorry, Council Grove Elementary.
It's been moved and seconded for approval of 2 new counselor positions, one at the Council Grove Junior Senior High School and one at Council Grove Elementary School. Any further discussion? If not, all in favor, please raise your right hand. Thank you. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Action item C, classroom furniture.
So these next 3 items are just RFPs that went out for purchases that need to be made. First one in C is classroom furniture. So this is from Navratz for items that just need to be purchased for classrooms. You can see through there, there's a variety of desks, chairs, bookcases, student chairs, whiteboards. Navratz was the winning bid, I believe for that's the laptops.
There's no total amount as we don't know what we need to purchase yet. Those are just the common items that we've often been purchasing. There's no way to get a total bid on this sort of, but yet. See, don't even have all those requests in, but they will be items ordered off this list.
Okay, I guess I have a question. If we're approving the bid, but we don't have an actual bid, what are we?
Most likely, the purchase total will be over $20,000. But there's, I mean, we don't have to do it like this, but we can just use this price list and then not accept it, and then just whenever you get those furniture requests back and have a total, maybe it won't even be over 20,000, or if it is over $20,000, then we'll bring it back with, this was the bid, this is the total for all of the needs and wants in the district. You can approve it that way.
Price is good through the end of March. So I mean, that's.
I assume if we don't lock in these prices now, they'll go.
Yeah, probably, we don't, don't know it for sure. Also ordering them, the sooner, the better, just to ensure that they're here by the start of the school year. Things are definitely being produced a lot faster than they have been in the past couple of years, but, there's no guarantee.
Are items like these on a cycle at all? Does that make sense? Like the 3rd grade classroom gets new desks on a certain year, or?
No, it's been, on like a need and even a want basis. Staff get a request, various furniture items, and then the building principal will go through and discuss those with the staff member. And they'll determine if they agree with the staff member's request. Sometimes they come back and say, I agree with it, but I think they could hang in there another year or two. And so then if we, kind of look at everything that we need to order, if it's really not too much, then maybe that person's request, we can go ahead and slide in there. Or if it's already quite a bit being requested, we might say, yep, we'll have you wait until next year.
So, kind of along Tina Ray's question, if we take action on this tonight, we're approving whatever ends up needing or wanting to be purchased, that's what we're approving?
Yeah, so this being our vendor.
Okay.
And then again, I assume it's gonna be over 20,000, and then that will be brought back to the board as well.
Okay.
And it'll be based off of items purchased off that list. And again, this is the most common, so we might have something that's not on this list. We might have something that we end up purchasing somewhere else. For example, if it's something specific to like a science classroom, it could be something that we need to order from a vendor who has science specific equipment. But generally speaking, the bulk of our classroom furniture needs would come from NAVRADS.
So I think probably a better way to word it would be, you're not approving a bid, you're approving a price list to order from, because this would be a pricing guide, because we don't have a quantity and an amount. Just approving a price list to go off of, but when the quantity and amount is determined.
How many bids did we get?
Just this one.
Is this normally where we purchase?
Yes, we have been for, ever since I started working on classroom furniture replacement, cycles years ago. It's always been through NAVRADS. They assemble all of the furniture and deliver it. They'll take out the old furniture. They'll even haul it off if we're like, it's going to the dump. They'll take it for us. And then they keep track of all of our inventory. Everything comes with some sort of a warranty. So all I have to do is say, teacher calls and they say, like this desk leg broke. Great. Snap me a picture of the sticker underneath it. I send that off to our rep. I say, leg broke. I just sent them off that picture of the sticker, and they take care of it and they swing by with a new leg or a brand new desk if it needs it. So it's been very useful to have that sort of service tied to these purchases as well.
But just for clarification, we're asking for permission for NAVRADS to be the vendor and to approve this price
Well, we
list.
don't have, I guess I'm not 100% sure. It was just that on the list of items that we needed to do better on, one of them was our furniture purchases because they are over $20,000, which means we go out to bid. But it's just sort of a weird process. So we've gone out to bid. We will come back because again, most likely it'll be over $20,000 for that approval.
So this is your only bid, but would you also hear from other places?
And if we seek input from other places, they're not allowed to, because the way the bid process works, it goes on the website. And then you can reach out to ask people to bid on it and give them your bid parameters. So, there's not a lot of furniture supply companies around, so most of them are mailed or direct. So they wouldn't have a rep like NAVRADS that would come out and work on to do the customer service like they do. It'd be more you get out a catalog and order from a catalog.
It sounds like there's been a good rapport with this company in the past. So.
I think so.
Yeah.
I would just want to double check to make sure. I don't know. I want to check with the ASB attorney about, is it okay to approve a vendor list like this and then order after the fact, or do we need to have all the items together and then have them give us a quote for a bid and then do that? I'm not familiar with, I know that would be okay. I don't know about like an approved vendor list where we can, since everybody had a chance to give us pricing, it may be okay. I don't know. I think it'd be good to reach out to ASB and just say, is it okay to just put a preferred price list together like this, and then we can order off of it once we know our quantity and items, or do we need to get our quantity and items together and then have them give us a bid quote if it's over $20,000.
If they, sorry about that, if they were to say something like, yes, that's okay, then we would have to have another special meeting in order to vote. See what I'm saying?
Right.
If it was before next one.
Well, maybe you could approve the vendor list contingent on it's legal to do that through KCB. And that way it's approved. If the attorney says, yeah, that's fine. If not, then yeah, we'd have to either reconvene and vote, or wait till the April meeting if the pricing's still good. If we know, I don't know when we'll
Or
have.
can we
all
put a
the-
max on that we approve this vendor, but not in excess of $40,000?
Well, if it's over 20, that's where I just want to make sure with Kansas bid law that we don't have to have a package quote for exactly what we're getting versus an open-ended item like this. That would be just what I like to know. I'm not sure.
What would it hurt to take it off of the agenda and ask that question? And then if they say it's fine and NavGrats is like, we got the price right now, we could reconvene or whatever would be next
Do a
to
quick
approve
Zoom
that.
meeting
Yeah.
Just to approve that bid process.
Yep, that sounds good.
So,
And who contacts KASB? Does that need to be us or will that be you?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
okay, so we're gonna table that until we hear, and then we can do a Zoom meeting, quick 15-minute meeting or something to go over that. Okay, the next action item are the laptop computers.
This is for our laptop rotation. This bid included 35 Dell laptops, which would be for our teacher and secretary rotations, and then 60 for the 14-inch Chromebooks. We got multiple bids. I think the winning bid was SHI. There is one bid that's cheaper, but they didn't bid a comparable computer. They bid an IBM ThinkPad, which didn't have the same specs. That Tori requested, Tori is our IT administrator for the Dell specs. They quoted an AMD processor, not an Intel processor, and some other things. So of the specs that were quoted out in the RFP, SHI was the winning bid, I believe.
And it looks like it was those highlighted options 1 and 3 for a total of $71,468.05.
That is correct. And just for clarification, the Chromebooks are student machines. We issue to students.
And is that a yearly purchase or how often?
Yearly, yes, but for different rotations. So we get 4 years out of a rotation for students, and the 14-inch ones are for the high school kids.
Okay.
So we went with a bigger screen than an 11-inch screen. Like this next year, the rotation wouldn't be for these machines, it would be probably an 11-inch elementary rotation, and that way they cycle in. Tori's got a process and a cycle developed, so
It's not all
we're
at
always
once.
gonna be purchasing them, but it won't be for the same cycle of students. It's one thing we learned during COVID, when everybody was at home trying to do some of the things on an 11-inch screen for high school kids is very frustrating. So we piloted last year, we bought a handful of 14-inch screens because we wanted to see damage wise, if they're bigger machines being in a backpack, how they would be handled damage wise. It seems to have gone very well. So we're just gonna implement full. It's more expensive, but I think it's worth it for our kids.
Any other questions?
I would make the motion that we approve the laptop bid from SHI Computers not to exceed $71,468.05. As presented.
It's been moved and seconded that we approve options 1 and 3 from SHI not to exceed the 71,100, that's
Scroll
okay,
back up.
468.
468.05.
468.05. Any other discussion? Not all in favor, please raise your right hand. Thank you. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. And yet another bid, the walking bridge.
So this is the last one. This is to replace the walking bridge over the elementary school that crosses that drainage ravine. The one now is very old and it was made with some iron beams that have rusted through and the bridge isn't stable anymore, so we've had it blocked off. This one is to replace that. We went with aluminum for longevity. And this is from Seamers Construction and the only bid we received for $25,350. Now we include removing the old one, concrete work for the footings for it and the bridge itself and installation.
Any questions?
I'll make the motion that we accept the bid from Seamers Construction to replace the bridge, not to exceed $25,350.
Second, Billy? Right. It's been moved and seconded that we approve the bid from Seniors Construction in the amount of $25,350 for the walking bridge at Counts Grove Elementary School. Any further discussion? Not all in favor, please raise your right hand. Thank you. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. You're okay.
Madam President, I move we go into executive session to discuss an individual employee's performance pursuant to non-elected personnel exception under coma. For how many minutes? For 30 minutes with the board and Mr. Doty.
Yes. Thank you.
Second.
So moved and seconded that we go into an executive session for non-elected personnel with the board and Dr. Doty for 30 minutes. All in favor, please raise your right hand. No, same sign, motion carries.